Hey guys, it's Beth. Thank you for showing up and joining me again for this week's show of Remorselessly Biblical. I am so grateful that you continue to join me on this journey, to show up in your own journey, and to be exactly who you were created to be. You know, one of the things that I love the absolute most about being here with you are the folks that we get to interview, the people that come on the show and are just so open and vulnerable and willing to share their stories with us, with each of us every day, because I think you get to a point in your life, at least this is true for me, where you start to question, right? You just start to say, how can I take all of these experiences that I've gone through, all of the things that I am continuing to learn and grow and be shaped and be formed in my own story of life, and put them to use for the greater good, to show up exactly who God made you to be so that you can continue to point people towards Him, right? And that's just so much enjoyment. It just causes so much, I don't know, just this whole feeling of joy, really just joy. I'm very blessed to be able to be here with you. So this week, you guys, I can't wait for you to meet Beverly Sartain. She is a holistic coach, and she owns the Holistic Training Institute, whereby she teaches other people how to coach. I'm actually in her class. That's where she and I met. It's just this amazing sort of spiritual connection that we have. And speaking of spiritual, she wrote a book called Transcending Trauma, How I Used Spiritual Psychology to Heal My Life. And I just am so grateful that Bev showed up here on her own journey, very transparent at this point in her life, to speak into each of us and to say, you know what? I've been there. I've been broken. I have seen patterns of my own bad behavior and bad choices when I was at a point of anxiety and depression and anguish and just things that each of us actually go through, and some of us are afraid to talk about. You know, I mean, how many of us just have been conditioned to say those things are weak and those things aren't allowed, or boy, I don't know who I can go to talk to about these, and so they just sometimes get swept under the rug, and people just don't know how to help, because honestly we don't know how to help ourselves. But that's not who we're created to be. That's not who you are. That's not who I am. That's certainly not who Beverly Sartain is. Wait till you guys meet her. So please help me in welcoming her to the show. Thank you for joining me today on Remorselessly Biblical. I'm really, really glad you're here.
Me too. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate being able to be in this space with you.
Yeah, thank you. One of the things that I always tell our viewers and listeners is how I meet the people that agree to come on here. Because I'm a really big believer in the world, the universe kind of working out as it should, right? That we're drawn to one another, and that people come in and out of our paths and on our journeys at just the right time for just the right reasons. So I found you because you are a holistic coach. And when you and I started to speak, I was like, I couldn't stop listening to you. I was like, tell me more. And I just was incredibly drawn. So can you share with everybody just, what it is that you do with the Holistic Training Institute and just sort of your background?
Yeah, I would love to share my background. Well, I always start really at my breakdown, which was really my breakthrough. So I was a helping professional, and I was in my mid-20s, and I basically had this epiphany one day at work. I was working at a nonprofit domestic violence shelter as a program manager there, and I just had this realization that I was really good at helping other people, but not good at helping myself. And what I really mean by that, because now I realize I wasn't helping at my best either, was just the awareness of I would prefer to help somebody else than help myself, was the awareness that I had. And it didn't feel good. It wasn't a good feeling to think I am focusing more on service to others as a way of escaping myself. And so it was a really big aha moment for me. And it started a long recovery and healing journey at that time. And I'm really so glad that it did happen then, because there were so many beautiful things that transpired from that. And it really changed the trajectory of my life because I had that awareness and I made some steps to do things differently. And so at that point, I started to go to therapy and get some support, which was also really difficult because I saw myself as somebody as a helper. And so to admit that I wasn't able to help myself was a really hard thing. And it took me quite some time to get to the point. I had a lot of consequences in my experience, and I got to a really bad place mentally and emotionally inside of myself that almost forced my hand, to be honest, just forced my hand that I really had to get some support. I wasn't able to do it on my own. And that really started this journey. And I was about 6 months into my recovery from substances, but not just substances. I mean, I had really poor relationships. I feel like I was using relationships as a way to fill that void inside of myself. I was always an overworker. I really loved to use work to feel valuable and worthy. And I was an overgiver. I took over responsibility. I was overgiving to people and then feeling resentful. And so there was a lot of codependency that was happening for me in my behaviors. And so there was a lot to clean up. I mean, there really was a lot to clean up. And I'm really happy that spiritual psychology came on my path at that point. There was a coworker that I had that was going to school at the University of Santa Monica. And he just knew me and knew me well and knew I was kind of at a crossroads and introduced me to the spiritual psychology program. And I ended up getting a master's degree in spiritual psychology. And so learning those principles and paradigms really came in at such an incredible time for me because I was just at this place in life where I knew I can't carry on this way of being that I've been being with myself, which was a lot of self-loathing and self-deprecation and just a lot of negativity inside of myself. And I just at that point knew there's got to be a different way to be inside of myself and relating to myself. And so spiritual psychology really gave that to me. And that was really kind of the first time that the spiritual level really came in full swing. And I think it's because I did some really good work on the mental and emotional levels to get to some stability. And then the spiritual level was able to come in. And then now I feel like it's really impacted my physical level in a really, really great way because those all 4 levels are feeling well-rounded and well-balanced for me. And so, carried on with nonprofit work for about 10 years, worked at a nonprofit treatment facility, doing co-occurring work with mental health and substance use, became a substance abuse counselor, and then kind of hit a crossroads in my career, I would say, where it was like, I felt like there was something else. There was another step in my actualization. And I didn't know if it was social work or becoming a therapist, but it felt different than that. And at that point, the universe brought in coaching, and I signed up for a coach program. And once I started to do it, I was like, this is it. This is how I'm going to make my mark. This is how I'm going to create my own mission and actualize my own mission versus somebody else's. And so I've been on that journey for 6-7 years now. And just last year started the Holistic Coach Training Institute, where now we teach other people how to coach so that we can have this beautiful ripple effect of people learning how to coach, but also facilitating a space where people get to just utilize their own strengths, their own resources, their own inner wisdom, so that they can create something that feels really meaningful for them. So yeah,
thank you. I hear I know. I could listen to this all day because really it's just, you've outlined such a beautiful, it's a journey, right? It's all of this. And so what I hear a lot of is there were initially maybe some boundaries, and some vulnerability and some walls that were put up from a self-preservation and protection standpoint to deal with your own hurts and traumas and life things. And then you all of a sudden get to, I think we all do, a crossroads in our lives. And we just say, this can't be it. I know I'm worth more, but sort of the paradox is that we've been living like we're not worth more. We've been doing for everybody else, but not ourselves. And then once we, I think, come to a place of awareness, like you always share with us and teach us, when we become aware that we matter too, right? That we have this worth and mattering and sense of wholeness that awaits us. It's then how do we get that into an alignment? And I love that you teach all of those together, because some people can be physically healthy and physically in shape, but their mental game is not strong.
Yeah.
And so that just becomes another misalignment, because then self-awareness, right? Do you ever find that self-awareness does not always lead to self-management? And
yeah.
Right?
I have this discussion all the time, because awareness is great, but you have to do something with the awareness. Yeah. And that's why I love teaching people coaching, because coaching is not just about having an awareness or a discovery or an insight. It's about now that you've had that incredible insight, awareness, or discovery, now what? What do you want to do with it? What do you want to do differently? What are the possibilities now that you have had this awareness? So as you know, I'm really big into application. And I actually think that that's why I was able to have the transformation that I had. Because when I receive information, I take the information and I look for the my personal insider awareness. And then I look for, what am I going to do with this? How am I going to take this and put it into physical world reality so that I can receive a shift, have a breakthrough, have a transformation? And so I'm always looking at everything through that lens of what's my insight here? What's my learning here? And now, how am I going to take that and do something with it? And that's really what I think made my healing go as quickly as it did, because I've just always taken that perspective.
Yeah. And leaned into it. Do you find that people who have the awareness, but then don't know how to translate that into action, into self-management, like doing something, answering the now what, do you feel like those are the folks that become the most sort of disgruntled and stuck, right? They just are they know, but they don't then know how to apply it. So they kind of just get miserable after a while, right? Like I've lived in that space as well. Like I know there's more to this, and I'm aware of my giftings, or I'm aware of my passions and desires, wirings, whatever we label and call those things. But then I'm like, well, so what do I do with them? How do I apply them? So how do you help people tap into that?
Yeah. In spiritual psychology, one of the paradigms that they share is about, victim consciousness versus creator consciousness. And that was, when I heard it for the first time, really just eye-opening for me, because I realized when I heard victim consciousness versus creator consciousness, I realized, and in a non-judgmental way, I just had the awareness that I had been living in victim consciousness. And in fact, if I stayed in victim consciousness, I had another awareness that I wasn't going to be able to heal in the way that I wanted to. And I also wasn't going to be able to co-create or build the life that I truly wanted to live. Because I knew if I stayed in this perspective of poor me, or why me, or this always happens to me, or, look at what they did to me. If I stayed in that space, which I had been living in for a long time, I knew I wasn't going to actualize my potential. And there was a certain part of the journey where actualizing my potential became more important to me than holding on to the old story of I'm a victim to something or someone or the world. I went through what I always say is like a shedding, a shedding of the ego, a shedding of the victim consciousness, and eventually kind of stepped into that creator consciousness, which just means really like taking ownership and personal responsibility and noticing your choice points and, making the best decision you can in alignment with the truth of who you really are. And so I just started to go more into that direction, which has been in alignment with me actualizing my fullest potential. And I just became aware that I was never going to actualize my fullest potential from that victim consciousness place inside of my own consciousness. Yeah.
Yeah. It's the narrative, right? I heard
Yeah.
you say that this is sort of, I'm hanging on to that story. I'm hanging on to that false belief or that victim mentality, like you say, that just sort of reminds us at every turn.
It was an identity, Beth. I mean, it was an identity for me. And that's why we see so many people have a hard time with it. Because, I've worked with people that have substance abuse issues, or they see themselves, with a label of mental health, a particular, mental health diagnosis, or they've had specific traumas. And so, I've had all of those things myself too. And so it was really hard for me to let go of my humanness, for me to de-identify from my humanness as the truth of who I am. Yeah. But when I was learning spiritual psychology, it was the first time that I heard I'm a spiritual being having a human experience. And that was the paradigm that just, I want to say broke something in me, but in a good way, it cracked open my heart and started to open me up to the loving. Because it was it shifted something in my consciousness, because my whole
almost
life,
like permission.
Yeah. I had been identifying with this shame and guilt for all of my bad choices as a human. And it was the first time I realized, no, those things are not the truth of who I am. The truth of who I am is I am a spiritual being, and I can forgive myself and have compassion and go through this process of healing the humanness, And so that's essentially what I did to create that journey.
Yeah. Healing the brokenness. I love it, because we all are like that. And I think we have so many more connection points than differentiators in life. And I think we get so stuck on and hung up on, well, this person or that group of people, whatever we box people into a construct, and we say, it's almost as if we have to have a right and a wrong.
Yeah.
If we're doing something one way, then that must mean that every other way is wrong. And that has been was my upbringing and experience with religion. I was like, oh, well, this is what I believe, so this must mean that everybody else is wrong. But then the other side of me, the spiritual side of me, questioned that all the time. And I thought, this doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel loving. It doesn't feel whole. It feels like an isolationist sort of mentality, as if we are ridiculing people that we're supposed to love and be in relationship with. Yeah. And so just that awareness it's freeing, right? Wouldn't you say, just with everything you've been through and you teach people, comes a profound sense of freedom, right?
Yeah. I love that it's you're freeing yourself.
Yeah.
That's the part, I love just remembering that, and I can remember there was someone in particular in my life, and this person is a coach, and they support other people. But I can remember hearing her say, no one's coming. No one's coming to save you. And that really rang true, I'm the one that has to save myself. And the truth is, the way that I was trying to cope with life was just bringing me down to my knees. And I knew I needed a different way to not only cope with life, but to move into healing and then to move into thriving. Because like I said, ultimately, I wanted to live my fullest potential. I didn't just want to cope or survive life. And I feel like I had spent so many years just in survival mode. And I really wanted to move through that energy of survival mode and really be a co-creator in my life. Yeah. So that was the intention.
Yeah. I love that you say that, because you are doing that. It's very apparent, right? You are creating this space and time and everything. You just light up because you're living that really authentic version of you. You're doing exactly what you were put on this earth to do. And, when you talked about identity, that's the part that really, because I know you have, as you mentioned, this nonprofit experience, and, that's where I am every day. I'm in a homeless shelter where I see people with all sorts of substance abuse issues, or just they don't have the support system. Oftentimes people will say, well, just get a job, right? As if that's going to solve homelessness. But really what it is, I find, to your point, is an issue of identity. Am I worth this? Because then you start to identify with that victim mentality, right. And then you stay there. You stay stuck in that wrong narrative that you're only ever worth this, or, well, if I keep making these choices, well, this is as good as it gets. Yeah. And I think for me, the biggest awakening I've had on my journey is that we all literally have the same amount of mattering and the same potential and the same amount of worth as spiritual beings. Like, I can't overstate that, because there is, to me, so many issues and divides and injustices in this world when we get off of that track of understanding that there is no us and them. Like, it's one, it's that's my language for it. It's just this sort of beautiful reciprocity in terms of living this difficult human existence. But if we look at it with the lens that you speak about, which is, no, we're spiritual beings, all of us here, and we're having very different human experiences, and humanity is rough. But when you tap into, right, the inner self, then the external, the co-creation of all that looks a whole lot different.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that, it's really important, that message of oneness. And I really believe it starts with each of us, so that's why my journey, I've tried to be the demonstration of the things that I now share with people. But I did it wrong at the beginning, in a sense, because I was trying to go outside in. I was trying to serve other people, but not serve myself. We hear that messaging a lot, like, be of service, you need to serve other people. And, part of my messaging is you have to take good care of yourself to be of service to somebody else, right? Yeah. So it's like, we have to remember the helper, the healer, the person that is the one that is providing the service also needs to be serving themselves. And I feel like when that's happening, then we can be of service from such a better place. You are letting your cup overflow. You have good energy for yourself and those you love. Like, that's such a different service than just over giving, over responsibility to try to feel some sense of worth and value. So I always feel like that is a really important message, that, like, the healing, the recovery, the journey starts with us, and it can start right now. It's just looking at what are the narratives, the beliefs, the stories that come up in your consciousness that you feel are getting in the way of your highest actualization, your highest potential. And then those are the things that you start to resolve and work on. And once those things are resolved, they really do and can be resolved. When those things start to dissolve, then just think of all that time and energy and worry that gets freed up to actually be turned into love and grace and compassion and non-judgment. Like, it's such an extraordinary process to go through. So, yeah.
I love it. And the other one of your key messages that I love listening to you share as well is just about being present, and so can you share a little bit about, from your perspective, what has worked for you, or maybe just like a ritual, or how you actually become present in the course of what we look around can be a chaotic world that we live in? How do you do that?
Well, it's changed a lot over the years, right? Next month will be 15 years of recovery and healing for me. And so when I first started my journey, it felt really scary to get present, because the truth is, when you've been masking your unresolved traumas for many years with whatever coping mechanisms, and then you stop doing those coping mechanisms, then it's like everything comes to the surface, in a sense. And that's why so many people are afraid of the process or don't want to do the process. But the truth is, we can't keep pushing the energy down. We have to let it come up and acknowledge it and work through it. We have to work through that energy. And so that's just something that is near and dear to my heart to do. And so it can be hard to get present to that at first. And that's why it's good to have some support going, so that you can be present to what you need to be present to there. But you can also feel supported from others. So when I first started, I really started on the 4 levels: the mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual, because I didn't have any type of routine to support myself. And so through spiritual psychology, learning those 4 levels and actually creating a practice around those 4 levels every day started to create some stability for me, some inner safety, and just consistency. I'm somebody who does follow through with what I say I'm going to do. And so I became very self-disciplined around that practice. But it wasn't like a practice like I have to do this practice. It was I want to do this practice. Again, because I needed that support. So that's a great way to start your process, to use those 4 levels. Now I'm much more intuitive because I've cultivated a relationship with the universe over the years, and receive a lot of guidance from the universe that now, first of all, I've set up my days in a way. You know, I've picked a career. My relationship with my husband is a certain way. There's a lot of spaciousness, which I love and I personally need. And there's a lot of creation that comes through me. And so I've intentionally created a daily routine that's very spacious. I connect with nature a lot, and so I spend a lot of time in nature. So honestly, the presence it's almost there throughout the entire day. That's the truth now, which I haven't even really thought about that until you just asked me, which is kind of cool. So I appreciate the question. Yeah. It's more of a constant reconnecting. And what I mean by that is, like, if I do a coaching conversation with somebody, or I have a coaching class where I spend, 2 hours with people, the truth is I'm present there. I'm present with them in a certain way. And then when I come out of that space, then I almost do like a reconnection, like to myself again. But it's finding the things that bring you joy. It really is. It's finding the things that bring you joy. And that's what I guess my long-winded answer of, those are all things that bring me a lot of joy, is the spaciousness, is the nature, is the being with the dogs, is, spending time with my husband, who I also work with. We go on walks like 2 to 3 times a day together. So there's just a lot of presence and connection now, which I love.
Yeah. Thank you. And intentionality. You're very intentional.
Totally. I love intention.
Yes, I know you do. And I love that you love it, because I mean, it matters. And so, years ago, I would be the first person that would hear this kind of information and be like, whatever,
right.
Oh, well, okay, so I'll journal, or I'll do this, or I'll do that. And then it has taken me, my own spiritual process, because everything is a process. Like you said, when you first started out 15 years ago, you weren't just by default good at it. You just didn't know what to do. But you showed up and you tried, and then you continue to be formed. You continue to say, okay, this feels good to me. This doesn't so much. How do I cultivate? How do I co-create? And I think that is always my encouragement to people is, there is no one right way, but there is one right you. So if you can work from the inside and say, this really feels, I feel present. I feel joyful. I feel me, fully me. Like I don't have to hide anymore. Then that is just the beautiful part about it. So that intentionality, it's important. And what you also said is, I don't have to do it. Like, it's not a chore to do this. You desire to do it. It's a privilege to do it, and you love it. So thank you. So the last thing I want to
beautiful way of sharing it, Beth. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for saying that. This is what brings
I know
me being perfect. I know. I'm like, I could talk to her forever. I just really appreciate the people that come into our lives for those seasons and those reasons that, like you said, we sometimes aren't aware of until you're in the presence of somebody else and you're like, this makes a lot of sense to me. I'm a little bit afraid because my thinking has never aligned with that. But people, just with their presence, and not even with words, can really start to break down those barriers, which I love. So will you please share with everybody, the last thing before I let you go is just, I know you wrote this amazing book that shares much of what we've spoken about today, and you've shared with us. Can you talk a little bit about what that is, when you wrote it, and where people can find it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I wrote a book, Transcending Trauma, How I Use Spiritual Psychology to Heal My Life. And this is a book just so near and dear to my heart. And I know you've written a book too, right? Like, so when you're somebody who for a long time you want to write that book, I think people can really appreciate that, because I really feel like there's so many of us who feel like there's a book in us, and that we have something to share, a voice to share with people. And I have to say, like, writing this book the book is dedicated to my inner child. And, for a really good reason, because when I really didn't feel like I had a voice when I was younger, my little girl always was someone who liked to express through words. And so the truth is, I feel like I was going to write this book for a really long time. I wanted to write the book when I was about 3 or 4 years into my recovery, and it didn't come through that way. And now, it took 11 years from when I wrote it. And I can see now that there's a reason that it took that long. There was some more unfolding that needed to happen. I think I maybe still had some more healing that needed to happen, even though I can't name what that was. I think it's just, it comes when it comes. And it unfolds how it's meant to unfold. And that was really the process that I went through with the book, is just an expression of my truth. And, I always say, like, the book is about my healing through substances, mental health, and trauma. It's obviously called Transcending Trauma. I really feel like my childhood trauma, unresolved childhood trauma, was a big reason that I got into substance use, and some other coping behaviors that I share in the book. And I also believe that then really led to, some of my anxiety and depression issues. So it's a really heartfelt book. It's not like a doom and gloom story. In fact, like I said, I like to start the story off where there was a breakdown and actually a breakthrough. So that's where the story begins. And the story is very much about how I learned spiritual psychology, what I learned that I applied. And so I just felt like I wanted to share that message with people of, here's how I took this particular philosophy that I was learning, and this is how I took some of this philosophy and actually applied it to my life. These are some of the results I got. I share specific, processes in there. Like, I actually share my homework assignments and stuff in the book so people can see how I really worked what I was learning. And I just hope that it offers just my one person's process towards healing. And I always want people to know that healing, like, it's a patchwork of different things. There's a lot of different pathways and to healing. And spiritual psychology was the thing that opened me up to the loving and really supported me in letting in love into myself and into my life. And that's how I believe that I was able to resolve some things that felt real heavy for me. So yeah, that's a little bit about
Transcending Trauma. Yeah. And so where can people find it?
People can get it off of Amazon. That's probably the best place for people. The Personal Power Press is the publisher, so they also have it on their website. There's a workbook that is on the Personal Power Press website. They're really standalones. Like, I have the book, I have the workbook, and then I have the spiritual psychology healing course. And so there is a way to purchase all three if you're feeling like you want to go on that journey of receiving some lessons and applying some of the things that you're learning. Then I have that available. But the book is a great place to start too if you're interested. Yeah.
Perfect. I'm going to link all of that into the show notes, as well as a link to your podcast, which you just kicked off, and I'm super excited about for you, because I listen to that every morning when I wake up, and I'm like, I like the live coaching sessions, right? So you guys, you can hear Bev be on there and coach people through a process, which is what we're all doing on this journey. We are all learning from one another and saying, like, tell me more about this. Why is that important to you? Those questions, you really are probably one of the best question askers I've ever been in the presence of. I'm like, tell me more. And what I love and really respect about you is that you have such a genuine curiosity, and you genuinely care about every person that you are holding space with, because you just want to say, I hear you, I feel you, I sense you, you matter. It's just this immediate, I think for me, I was so drawn to you because I immediately went, I don't feel uptight. I don't feel like I have to put on any kind of pretense. I just feel like this rush of calm, which, as you know, I work through every day. That's my own spiritual transformation over here. But I just really appreciate that. And I know that others will as well. So I'll link the book and your podcast and all of your resources there. So
yeah, I really appreciate that. I appreciate you saying that, because it is really important for me to hold just a loving space for people. I'm not trying to get anybody to do anything or go anywhere or be any different than they want to be, but I do love to facilitate and hold that loving space so people can discover themselves and make those decisions for themselves. So I appreciate that. And I just want to thank you so much for being so open and allowing people to come here and share their truths. I truly believe we can lift one another up, and that there's so much value in just finding commonality, strengths, all of this insight that each of us have, and lifting that up. Like if we were all doing that for ourselves and the people that are around us, it makes such a big difference. I've seen it over the years. It really makes such a big difference. So thank you for being one of those people.
Yeah, thanks for saying that. Sure beats 7th grade middle school girls, doesn't it? Who knew? So thank you so much for being here today with us. And I appreciate it. So thanks for joining.
Thank you.